Okay, so you're here with us on the deep dive because, well, you want to get to the heart of things, right? You want to really understand the essentials without we're getting lost in a whole ocean of information. And that's what we're all about. And today we are zeroing in on something so essential for clear communication. I mean, it really is the backbone.
Yeah.
English grammar.
It's true.
We've got some really incredible resources lined up that just break down the fundamental rules. And our mission today is to really extract the absolute must-knows. It's like your personal cheat sheet to constructing really strong, clear sentences and avoiding those common mistakes that we all make sometimes. We'll be covering a lot of ground today. We're going to hit those key categories like parts of speech, those foundational elements, and you know how to actually put them together into sentences that actually make sense, right? We'll also be tackling verb tenses, making sure your subjects and verbs agree, the ins and outs of a and the, and those tricky prepositions that show relationships. We'll cover when to say I versus me, how to ask a really solid question, and we'll even highlight some common grammar gremlins to watch out for. And maybe most importantly, we'll explore some surprisingly effective ways to really lock these rules into your memory for good.
Sounds good.
So are you ready for a deep dive?
Absolutely. I'm ready to dive in. Let's start at the very beginning with the parts of speech. Our sources really pinpoint this as the essential building blocks of language. If you imagine trying to build a house, you need to know what a brick is, what a beam is, what a window is. Parts of speech are kind of the same for language. Understanding what each part does is really that crucial first step to constructing those clear and meaningful sentences.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like knowing the different tools in your toolbox, right?
Exactly.
So let's take a look at these tools one by one. First up, we've got nouns. So what are they really?
Nouns are basically names. It's a name for a person like teacher, a place like school, a thing like car, or even an idea like freedom. And our sources give some really straightforward examples, but it's important to remember that nouns also include those more abstract concepts like democracy or imagination.
Right.
So, one way to think about it is nouns are the core things and ideas in your sentences.
Yeah.
It's the first step to building any meaningful statement.
Okay.
Without a clear subject, and that's often a noun or a pronoun, right, your sentence lacks that foundation.
Yeah.
And there's a handy tip to remember them. Can you see it? Can you touch it? Can you name it? If you can, it's probably a noun.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it. All right, so next we have pronouns. So what role do they play in all of this?
Pronouns, there are stand-ins for nouns. They help us avoid sounding repetitive and, kind of boring. Instead of saying, John went to the store and John bought milk, we can say John went to the store and he bought milk.
Right.
Our sources list out common ones.
Mm-hmm.
He, she, it, they, we, I, you. The idea here is efficiency and flow. Imagine reading a paragraph where every single noun is repeated over and over. It would sound so clunky.
Yeah, it would be clunky.
So pronouns help us smooth things out.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's talk about verbs. These are the action drivers of our sentences, right?
That's exactly it. Verbs express an action like run, eat, or play, but they also cover states of being like what something is, the verbs is and are.
Right.
So in the sentence, the dog barks loudly. Barks is the action. But in the sky is blue, it describes the state of the sky.
Okay.
The key to remembering verbs is they show either an action happening or a state of existence. They're what make the sentence do something or be something.
Got it. So they're like the engine of the sentence?
Exactly.
Now, adjectives, these add a little flavor, a little description, right?
Exactly. Adjectives describe nouns and they give us more detail about their qualities.
Okay.
So think of words like big, beautiful, old, clever. All these examples are straight from our resources.
Right.
So instead of just saying, a house. We can say a big house or a beautiful house.
Yeah.
Adjectives really help to paint a more vivid picture with our words.
They do the descriptive brush strokes. What about adverbs? I feel like those have always felt a bit more elusive to me.
Adverbs, they modify verbs, adjectives, or even other adverbs.
Okay.
So the examples that we have here are quickly, very, well, often.
Okay.
So if we say she sings beautifully, beautifully describes how she sings.
Right.
If we say it was a very cold day, very describes the adjective cold.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone speaks very quickly, very actually describes the adverb quickly.
Okay.
A really helpful clue for spotting adverbs is they often end in "-ly", and they typically tell us how, when, where, or how often something occurs.
Okay, the flyly ending is definitely helpful. All right, so up next we have prepositions. These little words, they show relationships, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Prepositions show the relationship between a noun or pronoun and another word in the sentence. So think of words like in, on, at, over, under, before, after.
Okay.
Our sources give us some really good examples like the keys are on the table to show location, and the meeting is after lunch to show time.
Right.
Prepositions are really crucial for understanding the connections between different elements in a sentence.
They are.
And they can answer questions like where, when, or how.
All right. I'm starting to get a clearer picture of how all of these parts fit together. Now we have conjunctions, the great connectors.
That's it. Conjunctions link words, phrases, or even entire clauses together. And the classic examples are and, but, or so, because.
Right.
So we can say, I like coffee and tea. This uses and to join two nouns.
Yeah.
We could say he was tired, but he kept working.
Right.
And this uses but to show contrast between two ideas.
Uh-huh.
You can really think of conjunctions as like the glue that holds different parts of your sentences together.
They're the glue. And the last, but certainly not least, in our parts of speech toolkit, we have interjections, the exclamations.
Exactly. Interjections are words or short phrases that express sudden emotion.
Okay.
So, wow, ooh, oops, hooray! These are all perfect examples, and our resources highlight that they often have an exclamation mark after them, and they really convey a strong feeling. Wow, that was incredible. You can almost hear the emotion in just that one word.
You really can. So those are our 8 fundamental building blocks. But now how do we actually assemble them into something meaningful? That's where sentence structure comes in, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Knowing the individual parts is essential, but understanding how to actually arrange them is key to clear communication.
Right.
And our sources, they really emphasize this basic English sentence structure. Subject plus verb plus object. So, for example, the cat chased the mouse. Cat is the subject. That's who performs the action. Chased is the verb. That's the action itself. And mouse is the object. That's what receives the action. Understanding this basic framework is really so crucial. You can think of it as the basic recipe for a sentence.
Right. It's that simple structure and it just makes sense. But I mean, there are different kinds of sentences, aren't there? Beyond that really basic one.
Yeah, our resources actually touch on 3 main sentence types.
Yeah.
So we have the simple sentence that contains just one independent idea, like birds sing.
Okay.
That we have a compound sentence, and that has 2 or more independent ideas that are linked together, often with a conjunction like and or but. For example, birds sing and flowers bloom.
Okay.
And then we have a complex sentence, and this one contains one independent clause and at least one dependent clause.
Okay.
Like, because the sun was shining, the birds sang. And you notice how the dependent clause, because the sun was shining, it can't stand alone as a complete thought.
Right. It can't.
It needs that independent clause.
So even as sentences get more and more complex, they still need that core subject and verb.
Exactly. That's non-negotiable. Every complete sentence, no matter how long or complex, must have at least a subject, so who or what the sentence is about, and a verb, the action or state of being.
Right.
Without those two core components, you just don't have a complete thought.
Okay, so we've got the building blocks, we've got the basic blueprint. Now let's navigate the sometimes trickier territory of time. Verb tenses. I think this is where a lot of people get tangled up.
It's true. Verb tenses can feel daunting, but our sources, they break it down in a really, really helpful way. And they focus on those three main time frames, present, past, and future.
Right.
And within each of those, we have three primary forms. Simple, continuous, also called progressive and perfect.
Okay.
So let's just use the example, play music. In the present tense, we have I play music. That's simple.
Okay.
I am playing music. That's continuous and ongoing action. And I have played music. That's perfect. An action completed with present relevance.
Right. And then the past tense follows that same pattern. I played music. That's simple. I was playing music. Continuous in action and progress in the past. And I had played music. Perfect. An action completed before another point in the past.
Exactly. And looking to the future, we have I will play music. Simple. I will be playing music. Continues an action that will be in progress in the future, and I will have played music perfect. And that's an action that will be completed by a certain point in the future. So what's so fascinating here is how these different forms allow us to express not just when something happens, but also its duration or completion relative to other times.
Yeah, and that memory tip about using time words is so practical. You know, like yesterday, that's a really strong indicator of the past. Now clearly points to the present, and tomorrow signals the future. Those time markers, they can be like real anchors for choosing the right tense.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
Now let's tackle, I think, a really fundamental rule that assures that our sentences flow smoothly and logically, and that's subject-verb agreement.
Ah, yes, making sure our subjects and verbs are in sync. What's the key thing to remember here?
The core principle is that a singular subject needs a singular verb, and a plural subject needs a plural verb. So it's all about matching in number.
Right.
Our sources give a very, very clear illustration. He goes to the park is correct because he is singular, and goes is the singular form of the verb in the present tense, often with that S ending.
Right.
Conversely, they go to the park is also correct because they is plural and go is the plural form, no S.
Okay.
And this mistake, he go to the park, you know, it immediately jars because the singular subject is paired with the plural verb form.
You can just tell that it's not right.
Exactly.
So that "-s on the present tense verb for singular subjects is like a really important flag to watch out for.
It is.
Got it. Let's move on to those little determiners in articles, a, an, and the. When do we know which one to use?
A is generally used before words that begin with a consonant sound. And it's important to focus on the sound, not just the letter. So a car, a dog, a banana, those are straightforward. And is used before words that start with a vowel sound, like an apple, an egg, and importantly, an hour.
Right.
Notice that the H is silent, so the sound is a vowel sound.
Right.
The yay is reserved for specific nouns, things that have already been mentioned, or things that are unique, like the sun, the moon, the Eiffel Tower.
Okay. And the memory tip is nice and concise and really helpful. A and refer to any one of something, while the refers to a specific one.
That's it. Yeah.
That cuts through the confusion. Now let's circle back to prepositions, but this time focusing on how they pinpoint location and time more precisely.
Right. So prepositions are essential for adding these crucial details about where things are and when they happen. For location, our sources provide examples like the book is on the shelf and the cat is under the table. On and under really clearly define that spatial relationship. For time, we have examples like the concert starts at 8 p.m. and she was born in July.
Yeah.
At specifies a precise time, and in indicates a month. What's fascinating here is how these small words carry so much information about context.
Yeah, they really do. And there's a more, granular memory tip for at, on, and in, specifically when we're talking about time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a really useful hierarchy to remember.
Uh,
We generally use at for very specific times, like at 3:15 p.m.
okay.
We use on for days and dates, for example, on Tuesday or on May 20th.
Right.
And we use in for broader periods like months, years, seasons, or parts of the day. So in 1998, in the summer, in the morning. Thinking of it in terms of increasing scope can make it easier to choose the right preposition.
That's a great way to visualize it from that specific to the general.
Exactly.
Okay, let's revisit pronouns and how they contribute to a smoother, more efficient language.
Pronouns are indispensable for avoiding the awkwardness of repeating nouns unnecessarily. And our sources illustrate this perfectly with examples like, Sarah is a talented musician. She plays the piano beautifully. So instead of repeating Sarah, we just use the pronoun she.
Right.
Similarly, my brother and I went to the park. We had a great time. Uses we to refer back to my brother and I.
Okay.
Just makes our sentences flow much more naturally.
And it's important for us to know the difference between subject and object pronouns, isn't it? I feel like this is a common source of errors.
It really is. Subject pronouns, I, you, he, she, it, we, they, typically perform the action in a sentence.
Right.
They are the subject.
Okay.
Object pronouns, me, you, him, her, it, us, them, usually receive the action. They are the object.
Got it.
So, for example, in he saw me, he is the subject pronoun doing the seeing, and me is the object pronoun being seen. Getting this distinction right is key to constructing grammatically correct sentences.
Subject does the verb, object receives it. Okay, now let's shift gears to asking questions. What are the fundamental ways that we form questions in English?
The most common way to form questions in English is by using helping verbs.
Okay.
For yes-no questions, we often bring a form of to do, does, did, to be, is, are, was, were, or another auxiliary verb like can or will to the beginning of the sentence before the subject.
Okay.
So our sources give some great examples like, do you like coffee? Does she understand? And are they coming? And notice that inversion of the subject and the helping verb.
Yeah. Okay. And what about when we need more than a yes or no answer?
Those are our WH questions, which start with words like what, where, when, why, who, and how.
Right.
These question words typically come right at the beginning of the sentence, followed by a helping verb, then the subject, and then the main verb.
Okay.
For example, where do you live? Why did he leave? Or how are you feeling? And these questions, they seek specific information rather than just a simple yes or no.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground from those building blocks to putting sentences and questions together. Now let's shine a light on some of those common grammar mistakes that beginners often make. Recognizing these, I think, can save a lot of potential confusion down the line.
For sure. Our sources highlight 3 really prevalent errors that happen all the time. The first is incorrect subject-verb agreement, like saying she don't like it instead of the correct she doesn't like it.
Right.
That singular subject she requires the singular verb form doesn't in the present tense.
Yeah.
Another frequent mistake is using the base form of the verb when it should be conjugated.
Right.
For example, he wants to go instead of he wants to go.
Right.
Again, that singular subject needs that S ending on the verb in the present tense.
Got it.
And finally, our sources point out the error of adding to after a modal verb like I can to help, which should correctly be I can help.
Okay.
Modal verbs like can, will, should, must, they're always followed directly by the base form of the main verb.
Those are definitely errors I've heard and maybe even been guilty of myself at some point.
We've all been there.
And the memory tip that's offered is so helpful. Read your sentences loud.
Yeah.
Often, if something sounds a little off to your ear, it's likely that it's grammatically incorrect. So our auditory sense can be a surprisingly good grammar checker.
It really can.
Yeah. Okay, now finally, let's discuss some really effective strategies for actually committing these grammar rules to memory. Our resources provide 10 excellent methods for long-term learning and retention.
10. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive list. Let's highlight some of the most actionable ones. Consistent daily practice, even if it's just writing a few short sentences or a brief paragraph applying a specific rule, seems like a great starting point.
Yeah.
And the idea of using flashcards with a rule on one side and an example on the other is a classic technique for active recall. I also really like the suggestion of watching English language shows or movies and actively trying to identify the grammar being used in natural conversation.
Absolutely.
That's a good one.
All of those are super effective. Speaking aloud is another crucial element. Practicing constructing those sentences verbally, whether you're talking to a language partner or even just narrating your day to yourself, it really helps to solidify that understanding. And a surprisingly powerful technique is teaching someone else.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
The act of explaining a grammar rule forces you to understand it more thoroughly yourself.
Right. You have to know it to teach it.
Exactly.
And in our digital age, we have access to some fantastic tools. Our sources mention grammar-focused apps like Grammarly and Duolingo, which can provide that immediate feedback and make learning more interactive and engaging. Creating mnemonics, those memorable acronyms or rhymes like fanboys for coordinating conjunctions that can also be incredibly useful for recalling specific sets of rules.
It's true. And listening to and repeating simple English sentences is another excellent way to really internalize those correct grammatical patterns.
Right.
And importantly, don't be discouraged by making mistakes.
Everyone makes them.
Errors are natural. They're a valuable part of the learning process. So analyze your mistakes and learn from them. And finally, the idea of keeping a grammar journal where you regularly write down a grammar rule you've learned along with your own original examples. That is such a fantastic way to actively engage with the material and track your progress over time.
So many practical and encouraging tips. It really underscores that learning grammar doesn't have to be this dry academic exercise.
It doesn't at all. As our sources collectively emphasize, grammar is fundamentally a set of tools that empower us to construct those clear and effective English sentences. And mastering the foundational elements through consistent practice, encompassing repetition, reading, writing, and speaking, is really the most direct path to fluency and confident communication.
Yeah. I think the overarching message from all of our sources today is just really empowering. Grammar is approachable with consistent effort. Even dedicating a small amount of time each day to focusing on these fundamentals through these various methods can lead to some really significant progress over time.
That consistency is truly key.
It is.
So for you, our listener, as you continue on your journey with the English language, consider this. Take just one or two of the memory techniques we discussed today that really resonated with you. Maybe it's creating flashcards for those tricky verb tenses, or consciously paying attention to grammar while you watch your favorite English language shows, or maybe starting a simple grammar journal. Experiment with incorporating these into your daily routine, even for just a few minutes. And I think you'll be surprised how even these small, consistent efforts can begin to build a really robust and reliable foundation in English grammar. And maybe also reflect on which specific area of English grammar you currently find the most challenging, and that might be the perfect starting point for your focused daily practice.
That's great advice.